And welcome back to Tundra Dip Book Club Podcast.
Hi, Bonnie.
It's been a long time. Yeah. It's been oh so long. And I have been pining oh so hard.
Can we just a brief minute? Because we've only been gone for 2 months, but it's felt like an eternity.
It felt like 6 months.
It's felt like longer.
I mean, also, in these 2 months, this was not a plan, right? But it ended up being so perfect because, I mean, we're not trying to, glorify anything. But it was the perfect amount of time for me to get divorced and then come back. Just to, you know.
Just have life-altering plot lines. Bonnie has gone on her own little book life that she's literally living.
I am pretty sure that this color of this room is like the exact color of my old office at my old house. So it probably nobody would have noticed, except there was maybe whiteboards behind me before. So I have moved, yes, gotten divorced, and yes, been living my own little book club life for a little while. And to be fair, I have not been reading. This is the first book that I have picked up in our time away.
I am so glad you said that because aside from audiobooks, this is the first book I have physically read as well.
Mm-hmm. Can we talk about the guilt that I feel when I know that I haven't been reading? I feel so guilty. I'm like, my poor books. They're so lonely.
My God. Not only my poor books are so lonely, they're collecting dust, but the guilt to feel that, not only am I not reading these books that, I had every intent on reading, I curated certain books for the season, it's the guilt I feel knowing that I was also very excited, still very am excited, and anticipating a release of a new book that is coming in 16 days.
And it
16 days of us recording this.
Fourth Wing, Onyx Storm. I was just at Barnes & Noble. Zach and I were just at Barnes & Noble last night, and I was like, it was so cool because I was looking at the books, right? And so Fourth Wing was the first one. I was sitting there. I was like, we've done a podcast on that book, or my podcast has covered that book. Then Mountains Made of Glass, and I was like, we've covered this book. And then there was what's the one, JLA. Well, I saw both From Blood and Ash and the other JLA one we did. And I was like, whoa, my podcast has covered all these books. I was like, this is kind of cool. I feel kind of cool.
We are kind of cool.
Oh, look at the work we have done.
Yeah, and it's a lot of fun too because I have a lot of coworkers now as well who are getting into reading or who've always been into reading, but they just look at me like, yeah, well, I just read Fourth Wing and the Iron Flame recently because I had the time and said, funny you should mention that. You can go listen to my friend and I just geek out about it.
Exactly. So, needless to say, I'm very happy to be back. I also only rescued half of my books from my house, my old house. So they're sitting in my truck in a USPS, what do you call it? One of those bins that says, oh, it's illegal to put anything else besides mail in this. That's what's in.
Nice.
Yeah. So I gotta go and I emptied this bookshelf. So I'm gonna put them in this bookshelf. But yeah, I left my entire Throne of Glass box set behind. It's $100. It's $100 something.
Depends on if they're hardcover or not.
They're not, but they're the old ones, so I get to get the new covers. But yeah, we left a lot of books behind. Oops, no books left behind.
No books left behind.
Yeah, I know. It's really. I'm gonna cry. That's really sad. That's not, okay. Out of all the things to cry about
we're gonna cry about books.
We're gonna cry about my books being left behind. Anyway, It's fine. It's really fine. My whole thought process with everything, I didn't take anything with me except for my clothes and some books. So my whole thought process was always, I will just buy new stuff. So I will just buy new books. And I'll have the Throne of Glass new box set. Ha!
You know what? Sounds like we both need to learn a new skill, and we'll just learn how to rebind some paperbacks.
Yeah. I'm going to get the box set. See. This is the play. I'm gonna get the box set with the sprayed edges that have the stag and stuff.
Yes. We're just making upgrades, people. Upgrades.
Damn straight. All right. So for this month, I'm also sick, so bear with me on that. This month we are doing One Dark Window, as you know. I cannot tell you. Okay, so as we do when we start a new book, I cannot tell you why I like this book. I have one thing.
I have one thing.
The way magic works in this book is so different than any other book that I have ever read. But that's it. I mean, it's a good book. Don't get me wrong. I can't explain to you why I love this book so much. I have no ideas in my head as to why it's so good.
I will say it has taken a couple of very typical fantasy tropes and run with them. The main one being the evil stepmother, obviously. But it's also turned a lot of what we know on its head. And it's made us look at things differently. And I'm going to have several different deep dives, all of them relating to plants.
Ha! Because plants are important. Always.
Always.
Always. Interesting. So, what is the particular reason that you like it? The one reason?
For the characters. Mainly the nightmare.
Ha!
I am a sucker for a good, voice in the head.
Well, and think Tarn, but less jovial.
Yeah.
More murderous.
Very, murderous, sarcastic, sardonic, and speaks in riddles. You really have to think through what he's saying. And, again, full transparency, having read this entire series, which... Wow, claps for once, Dana actually knows what's happening going into the book. Mm-hmm. He tells you a lot.
Yeah, he does. And I'm like, oh.
He tells you a lot.
Specifically, I think this one's harmless. Specifically, he foreshadows a lot with Ione.
Ione, yeah.
Yeah, Ione. Yeah. That one, I was like, oh. Interesting. He basically says exactly what happens with her. That's interesting.
Yeah. Exactly what happens with her, he tells you, throughout the entire book, he foreshadows the ending of it and what's to come. It's just...
Because he knows, and anyway, we'll get into it. But I also want to know why he knows so, well, what's going to happen. I don't know. Even, why does he know? Because it's his plan, maybe. I don't know. Anyway. All right. Let's get into it. So, we start the book with Elspeth. I'm going to call her Izzy, because it's going to be easier for me.
Bess.
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 That's right. She does go by Bess. So Bess is very upfront about the fact that she had a fever when she was young, a sickness that is kind of blacklisting her from society. Give me your thoughts on these fevers. This magic in their veins. These black spider veins. It manifests in black spider veins. And potentially magical powers later on.
Yes. And this fever, this illness, whatever it is you want to call it, infection, I think is what they refer to it as, it only attacks children, and it's children who are left playing in this mist for too long. Mm-hmm. Which, like, why we gotta attack the kids?
Well, and I don't know, I am of firm belief that the sickness, which is interesting because I'm pretty sure that it proves us wrong, but I'm of firm beliefness that the sickness isn't bad. But I'm pretty sure that there are many things that prove us wrong on that. But it just feels weird that the sickness is bad.
Yeah. I feel like that it's a warning, definitely, and it's meant to be a warning. Mm-hmm. Because it very much, like, and they describe it in the book of when, so the children who are able to make it out of the infection, who survive the fever, are cursed, as some of them will say, with magic. But the magic that they're cursed with is the same magic that the forest spirits would have blessed somebody with had they gone and asked naturally before the cards were created. So it is very much it's a power ploy from the spirit going, like, I could have given this to you and it could have been all great and godly or whatever, like you would have given me whatever in return, but now I'm going to curse you with it and forcefully take from you through degeneration what you would have offered me for it.
So basically the only thing that sucks about it is they go crazy, essentially, which we see firsthand at some point.
Yeah.
But interestingly enough, Bess has no degeneration and no magical powers. Which, do you think she has magical powers?
Yeah.
What do you think it is?
So this is something that I've kind of been trying to toy around with what exactly it would be called. Because we do know that she has this voice in her head, the nightmare, right? I think that her power is very strong. I'm trying to think of like how to phrase this without spoiling anything for the entire series.
FYI, I have not finished the series. I read half of the next book.
Which is why I really need to bite my tongue.
Mm-hmm.
Because I do know, obviously, how the series ends and why it is certain characters know so much. But I think her power is very, very closely linked with the nightmare. And I think that's one of these things where that's all I feel comfortable saying at risk of spoiling.
Well, so for example, in the beginning, she thinks that she says she has no magic. She also says, though, that she's afraid that if she touches any of the Providence cards, that she will absorb them.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because that's what happened with the Nightmare card. Okay? We find this out very early on that Elspeth touched a Nightmare card that her uncle found. Let's just say.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a little sketch. Anyway, that he found, and since then she's had the nightmare in her head. So she's of full belief that if she touches any of the other Providence cards, that she will have a similar thing happen and she'll absorb it. Now, that's not a bad theory for her, but I also don't believe it to be true. So that is, not magic, right? Necessarily. Mm-hmm. But she describes it as if it is magic, right?
Yes, and I'm like going through the things I know. The one thing I will say that what we kind of get a feeling for is whenever it's very rare. Let's start there. It's very rare that somebody who has survived the infection lives. As soon as anyone is known to have the infection, like, they're taken to the dungeon, they're killed, like, they don't stick around for long. It's against the law. It's like, it is, her aunt and uncle are literally harboring a fugitive and therefore would be in trouble as well, right? And I want to say, and I could be wrong, but one of the, like, the telltale signs of somebody who has magic from this curse is the darkening of their veins. And that's something we see anytime she asks the nightmare for help.
Right. So magic enters her body at that point.
So there's some way, somehow, that this entity, this whatever it is she absorbed from the nightmare card, is her magic. And also
Correct.
her...
I don't argue that this the nightmare provides her with magic, right? I don't argue that. But I don't know of any that she has on her own. At least not in the beginning here. She doesn't seem to have anything. And yeah, whatever. There is a certain amount of, when you read the beginning of the chapters with the cards, as well as the way that the nightmare speaks, there is a certain amount of what do you call it?
Foreshadowing?
Well, foreshadowing, but in the form of prophecy. There's hints towards prophecy in the entire thing. So, if anyone else were to have touched this card, would they have absorbed the nightmare? No, because I'm sure that her uncle touched it before her.
Or did it have to specifically be somebody infected? Was it specifically meant for Elspeth herself? What is the deal, right?
So, very, very interesting. We also have this interesting, I don't know, like, thing where they don't enter the woods, right? Or step off the path. But here's the question. Her uncle and aunt, they live in the woods. You notice this?
Yeah. So it's dangerous to, like, drift off the path, right? I think in part because of highwaymen, in part because of where the mist gets thick. But everyone also has these lucky charms, be it like a raven's foot, a horseshoe, whatever. They have these lucky charms that they keep with them because with a lucky charm, the mist cannot harm them. Lose your lucky charm, you go insane.
Right.
Within the mist.
Right.
So I think that also factors into it.
It's interesting that they live in the woods because it doesn't seem like anyone else does.
Did you say that they're outcasts?
Potentially. It's just, I just noticed that, like, why do they live in the woods? And it has I've read this entire book. There's nothing particularly that, like, states why they live in the woods. But also, her aunt is very outcast-like. She is very witchy. And very, like, anti-society. To the point where, like, I think it's very clear that the author is trying to make her seem that way, because there's a moment where she's in her garden and she's making tinctures and harvesting herbs and kind of scoffing at court, or like the idea of their court. And so She obviously is harboring Elspeth. So she has a weird, she's not part of society really.
So I have a question, and I'm trying to find the exact quote really quick, because something was said. I can't find the exact wording of it. I'll find it eventually, I'm sure. But we do learn. We obviously know that Elspeth's mother is no longer around, right? She has passed away. From what we're not sure. But I read something. I could have sworn I highlighted it. They, to me, hinted at her mother also somehow dying of this infection.
Oh, yeah. Well, we don't know why her mom died.
We don't. But I had read something, and I could have sworn I highlighted it. Obviously, I didn't.
Is it when she was talking about, she was like looking at the book? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And talking and thinking about her mother and her aunt.
That's the page I'm opened up to. I'm not seeing exactly what I'm looking for at this point. But she had mentioned how, like, she had, ooh, is it here? This is getting me upset. I should have tabbed it. I tabbed everything else. But she had mentioned something of how, like, her mom, I don't know, it made it seem like her mom might have also, you found it.
Or perhaps I would grow sick, and no matter how I tried to hide it, waste away to nothingness like my mother had.
Okay, so her mom just wasted away. I don't know why the wording of that made it feel like her mom might have also gotten sick as a kid.
Because she was talking about herself being sick, and then she says, perhaps they would drag me away to the king's dungeons, or perhaps I would grow sick, and no matter how hard I tried to hide it, waste away to nothingness like my mother. So it kind of seems like those are like the two options, but for her being sick, you know, because it's referencing her being sick.
Being sick.
So that's a little sketch, you know?
Yeah, I could have, and maybe it was with like the whole degeneration talk as well, where I was just like, did her mom degenerate? Was she also sick? Why is that also why Elspeth is, in a sense, kind of like a chosen one?
Right. Right. So in the beginning here, her and Ione are going to her father's house because it's her birthday, right?
Yep.
Very downplayed her birthday, by the way. Anyway, if we get the first sense of the nightmare talking and the first riddle, which is super interesting. He says, yellow girl, he's talking about Ione, soft and clean, yellow girl, plain unseen, yellow girl, overlooked, yellow girl, won't be queen.
I read that, and it unlocked several things in my head. Mm-hmm. So, the main one of which is something I can't say because spoilers. Mm-hmm. But if you've read the second book, if you know, you know. But also, we hear in these 6 chapters that her father, Ione's father, wants her to be acquainted with the prince.
Hoth.
I'd also just really quick side tangent. What the hell is with fantasy books and the name Hawthorne?
And Rowan. His name is Hoth Rowan, right?
His name is Hoth Rowan, and then Ione's last name is Hawthorne.
Yeah.
That's just a personal thing I have.
Yeah, I agree. So, and it talks about how, Ione, I'm gonna say Ione, I think, is like very loved and very, like, she's like that, like, girl in the village where everyone's like, oh, she's pretty, and oh, she's so nice, and oh, she can't do anything wrong. That's who she is.
She also has a very girl next door character description. Like, I've read her description, and she reads like the girl next door, your typical all-American girl next door. She has a small gap between her front teeth. She is, the yellow blonde hair. She was honest, real. Her emotions were mapped on her face. While mine were hid carefully behind a practiced composure. She carried with an ease with her wherever she went, attracting people and animals. Everyone loved her. She didn't pretend. Ione. She simply was. Mm-hmm. It paints you a perfect picture of her, in my opinion, and she does read as this kind of quirky, fun girl next door. She has her flaws, but her flaws are what make her beautiful. That is important for later. Mm-hmm. But you can also hear Elspeth's jealousy. Mm-hmm. She's jealous. She doesn't have it that way. Elspeth has to have like this crafted mask of perfection, of kind of just like I can't think of words. Oh my god.
Yeah. She's very aloof.
She has to be, because she has to hide her truth.
That she has a weird voice in her head. Yeah.
That she was infected.
Yeah. We also get a little quote here that kind of gives us the setting of the book. So, like, the setting of the world we're in. Ahead of us, a carriage hurried by, the sound of clacking hooves sharp against ancient street stones. A man 3 flights above splashed dirty water out his window, and some of it sprayed onto the hem of my black dress. Children cried, women shouted and fretted, merchants hollered their stock, and somewhere a bell chimed. Blunder's crier chronicling the arrest of 3 highwaymen. So this is a very, like, primitive time. Mm-hmm. Very, like, horses and carriages, people using chamber pots, that type of time.
Dungeons.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
I picture the physicians, which I don't think we really see any of them in the set of chapters. We just hear them by names. But in my head, the physicians wear, like, the bubonic plague bird masks. Mm-hmm. I don't know why. They just do.
Mm-hmm. Scary. That's terrifying. So they travel to her parents' house. They see a woman get arrested for having black veins. And then they get to her father's house. And she's greeted by her stepsisters and her stepmother, Miriam, who is described as, she had all the appearance of a beautiful vulture. Perched in her favorite chair, she sat watching me with keen blue eyes, measuring whether I was worthy enough to consume. I felt like that was a very thought out description by the author.
Yeah. And that's really how she is, right? She picks apart not only Elspeth, but, like, kind of everything that means something to Elspeth. Starting with the irises, right? So I'm just going to point out a couple of natural images, nature, trees. Every family is named after a tree. Let's start there. So at the Spindle house, they have a spindle tree. Just for sake of whatnot, looked into it. Spindles are protection. They are representative of good fortune, of good luck. Very interesting.
They've had bad luck.
They've had a lot of bad luck. Next to the spindle tree, still small, unmatured, was a white beam tree. White Beam was Elspeth's mother, Iris, and her sister Opal's maiden name. So was this tree planted post-mortem, since it's still immature?
Yeah, or it was planted when they got married. Trees take forever. When they got married, you know, and it's still there.
They do take a while, but we're talking over 20 years now, because Elspeth is 20.
True.
So that's what kind of led me to believe it was like a post-mortem thought, right? That she's forever with him. Between that and then the irises that he keeps in a vase, that Miriam likes to look at and go, such a lackluster flower. I can't understand what your father sees in them. And Elspeth goes, that was my mother's name. Fuck you.
Well, I'm like, why even say that? Obviously, she knows that that's what her mother's name was. You know, why even say, I can't imagine what he... You know, like, it's pretty...
Oh, it's such a it's such a like low blow towards Elspeth, because she spends nothing but this entire name day. They don't even make it to dinner. Elspeth doesn't even make it to dinner because Miriam spent this entire time going, yeah, look at all the shit problems you've caused us. You should just never be in our lives again. Goodbye. Get out. And I think, you know, that tree symbolizing that the mom is there no matter what pisses her the fuck off.
Right. I don't understand. Can I just... Side tangent. Why, in these stories, why do these fathers get married again to these awful women that they clearly don't even like themselves? What is it about men that they just need someone to raise their children and fuck? Like, you probably could have just stayed single, Mr. Man, you know?
To his disservice, he didn't even need a child being raised because his fucking sister-in-law was doing that for him.
Correct.
And since
Although
these are not stepsisters, and these are not stepsisters, these are half-sisters.
Ugh. Ew.
Which makes it worse.
He had children with this bitch woman. Ugh. Ick.
Twins at that.
Ick. Fucking ick. Sorry, that's a sad thing.
I do believe it in part is a dowry that the wife's family pays to this man. And you have to keep in mind, Eric, is his name Eric? I feel like his name's Eric. Mr. Spindle, whatever this man's name is. He was, and we're going to assume that up until recently, has been the captain of the Deathdeers. Like, he was one of
He still is he not?
No, Raven is now.
Oh.
Raven is stated to be the new captain.
I thought he was like... Okay, hold on. He had once been captain. Ah, you're right.
So he is a man of high social accolade. You would want your daughter to marry him. Oh, that
He's
felt
like the
weird.
captain of the guard.
Yeah, he is high. He is high in power, which means you would have to offer up a very high dowry to get him to be with you. I'm almost positive he was made an offer he could not refuse with Miriam. He needed the money.
And then
or whatever it was that came with her dowry.
Yay. Ugh, I hate it. Also, I have a question for you. If you're on Flower Watch, what is yarrow?
Yarrow... Oh, I did look this up and I have forgotten. Yarrows. Yarrows, when I read, I immediately thought of Rebecca Yarrow.
That's funny.
Let me pull up my notes because I do have it saved in my notes.
Yeah, because her father always says to her, the fairest of all Yarrow, which is what he called her as a child.
Mm-hmm. So Yarrows, in general, symbolize healing and love.
Aww.
Which is kind of fucked up that you're giving your daughter who had the infection a flower that symbolizes healing every fucking birthday.
Well,
even though you sent her to live with someone else.
Yeah.
It can also symbolize strength, endurance, protection. There we go, seeing protection again. Good luck, positive energy.
It's almost interesting. It's like it's her own family plant. You know, like, yes, she's a spindle, but it's almost like he's separating her from that and giving her her own plant identity, which is interesting.
Yeah.
But it's
And
similar to theirs.
Yeah, and then playing kind of into that kind of awe factor. A yarrow is a symbol for being brave and courageous and saying, I love you in spite of everything.
Oh, well, there you go.
So you can have your little aw moment.
Yeah, there you go.
In spite of all that's happened, I still love you. And he's always called her his little yarrow.
I kind of skipped over a little bit. They also explain that she can see nightmare cards. They glow, and she can see them through clothing. Like, she can see them.
Yes, she can see the color. The color.
And her
of
dad
this
has
providence.
a well card. So I've been kind of trying to keep track of the cards. So this one is royal blue. And as far as I understand, the well card just means wealth. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have, I don't know how it works, but you have wealth of significance when you have a well card. Oh, the well card was her dowry.
Yes. Was Iris's dowry.
Iris's, yeah. Oh, that's right. I remembered it being a dowry, but I didn't remember whose. Sophie already had wealth.
I feel like I was getting the well confused for the chalice for a second.
Chalice is truth, right?
Yeah. There are so many cards.
Well is wealth. Because you have like an endless well of wealth. I know there
There's
are
so
a lot.
many
And there is a
cards.
point. There is a point where they
There's
kind
12.
of outline them all. And
Yeah, I have that. I have it marked and ready if you want.
Go ahead.
So there are 12 unique cards. And then a different number of each. So there are 12 black horses held exclusively by the Knights Elite Guard, 11 golden eggs, 10 prophets, 9 white eagles, 8 maidens, 7 chalices, 6 wells, 5 iron gates, 4 scythes, 3 mirrors, 2 nightmares, and 1 twin elders. Now sing it as it's the 12 days of Christmas.
Basically. Yep. Exactly. And so that's like 80 something altogether. 80.
78.
They said it was like, 78. Yeah. That's a lot of cards.
It is.
Considering it sounded like the Shepherd King had to make them each individually, it's a lot of cards.
He bartered for each set. So, like, he bartered one thing and got the 12 knights.
So he bartered
Right.
12 times.
I think he made 12 separate barters and got all 12 of those Providence cards, 78 total.
Very interesting. So, Miriam essentially is a bitch. And,
Hell yeah, she is.
and she ends up, Bess decides to leave.
Yeah,
And it's funny
she brings
because...
up...
Go ahead.
she brings up Alex, or whatever the fuck this guy's name is, from the last time Elspeth decided to go to the Equinox. Because she's like, your dad's going to want you to go to Equinox, and you're going to tell him no. And Elspeth's like, why? She goes, well, because last time you kissed this guy, and his mother and them haven't left us alone since, wanting to know where you are. And what are we going to do? Tell them that you live with your fucking uncle? Like, we can't say that shit.
And then she says, we have a happy arrangement, Elspeth. You stay away from court, quiet and out of sight, and your father pays the Hawthorns, handsomely I might add, to keep you like a pet.
Ugh, like a horse.
She's like, rude. I'm out of here. And then the nightmare says, this is kind of Taryn-like, pity we had to go. I was so enjoying the rousing conversation of beloved Nerium. Very sarcastic, because he hates Nerium. And then he kind of chides her for running away. He's like, you're being a coward. He says, and will you just scurry off with your tail tucked beneath you once more? So he wants her to, like, stay and fight for herself and stick up for herself, which is interesting, because I never really necessarily got the, other than her staying alive and not injured, I don't get the feeling that the nightmare cares much about her and her well-being. Now, mentally, that kind of thing, right? But he does have a vested interest, this is all I will say, he does have a vested interest in her staying healthy and her body staying intact. But other than that, he doesn't seem to care that much, except in this moment, about how she feels about things.
Yeah, in this moment, you don't, and honestly, I will say for a good part of this book, you don't get much of a care that he really cares for her more than to be a host.
And to stay out of his way.
Yeah. But yeah, because then he goes, yes, because running is exactly what she wants from you. And Elspeth goes, well, he wouldn't have abandoned me 11 years ago if he wanted my company. Like, fuck my dad. She goes, leave me, honestly, why bother taunting me? Like, it's my fucking birthday, it's my name day, like, why are you being so mean to me? And he goes, well, because that, my dear, is my nature. Your nature is to run away, my nature is to be a dick.
Yep. And they really don't, talk a lot. It's very interesting, but every once in a while he'll pop up and say something. It's mostly when other people are around.
Yeah.
That's what I will say. Which is why she probably stays away from other people. So then we get the story as to why she has the nightmare in her head after this.
I want to read off what that first card, that chapter 2 card says. So the little playing cards at the beginning. Nothing is free, nothing is safe. Magic is love, but also it's hate. It comes at a cost. You're found and you're lost. Magic is love, but also it's hate. I think we're starting to see a little bit of that little love and hate with a nightmare right there.
Well, and I honestly, the forest or whatever, the spirit of the forest, I mean, same thing. She used to give, and it is she, they say she used to give powers as a gift, and now she's doing it as a hateful, spiteful thing. So,
She used to be respected, and now nobody gives two shits because they have their own magic. They don't need her.
Right, exactly. Okay, so, she talks about the nightmare card, from the Book of Elders, and it says, in this description of the nightmare card, the Shepherd King wrote, of one's deepest fears brought to light, of hauntings and terror. I waited to be frightened for my dreams, for my nightmares, but they did not come. Interesting. It's really interesting that it's called the Nightmare card, because this card gives people the ability to speak in each other's minds and hear each other's thoughts. So I find that very interesting, because why would that be such a nightmarish... I mean, I get why that's unpleasant, but why is that any more unpleasant than, like, the chalice, which forces you to speak truth, right? Why is that such a nightmare to have someone else in your head? I get it for why it would be a nightmare for Elspeth, but why is it called a
nightmare in the sense of when you're in somebody's head and that card is used on you, they can hear what's in your head as well, right? So obviously a nightmare for her because she would be revealed. But think about it. Think about somebody having full, like, unfiltered access to your mind. Everything you're thinking, like, no filter. They know everything. They'll know all your secrets. Nobody wants all their secrets to be revealed.
But how is that any worse than any of the other cards and the powers that they have? It says specifically that the Shepherd King wrote of one's deepest fears being brought to light. Why is he so afraid of people being in his mind?
Well, I also know that it, in turn... And I don't know if this is revealed in those first 6 chapters, but it also goes into, like, if you use the card for too long, you start to get those, like, negative repercussions of you're now becoming schizophrenic, basically, and having those visions of your deepest, darkest fears come to life in your mind and almost ensnare you as a result of using the card for too long. So it could just be that this is its negative effects being showcased. I wonder in part if it's also because of what he had to barter to get these cards. Which I don't know if that's said in this book, so I will not be saying it.
So she touches the card and she has the nightmare in her head. That's what we find out.
Click, click, click.
Yeah, click, click, click is what she hears often, which is nails in her mind. Which I was just joking with Dana before this, that every time that happened, I was going to plug Tundra Dip as a business. Nails, you say? Oh, get your nails done at home, on your own, with Tundra Dip. Woo. We don't have any commercials yet, so we gotta make our own.
Oh. Well, the segues are only going to become worse and worse, you guys.
Yeah. Unhinged advertising.
Unhinged. We'll find something that relates to color name somehow. Nightmare, you say? We just made that color on Thursday.
I am indeed wearing it. Ta-da! It's the wrong color, but whatever. Okay, so the next thing that we have is she gets attacked. Yeah, she gets attacked by highwaymen, which is very interesting. And why? Why would they attack her? And they're like, search her pockets. They're trying to find cards. They don't find anything on her. She asks for the nightmare's help.
Mm-hmm.
So first we see that. And she fights them off.
Yeah. So they're going through this, like, they want cards. Highwaymen basically steal Providence cards off of other people, right? Mm-hmm. And so the nightmare very quickly tells her, like, tell them you have nothing of value. And she goes, are you fucking crazy? So what? They could take my flesh instead? Mm-hmm. I will say, do we have a female protagonist smart enough not to give strangers her name? Yes. She lies. She is Jane Yarrow in this scenario. She is no longer Elspeth Spindle. Not like that lasts for long for her, unfortunately. But she does. She calls for his help. And I think the only other time we've seen that was in the... I don't even know if we saw it in the flashback. But I know, like, she did it one of the very first times she ran away from the physicians. She called for his help.
Yeah, the first time. Yeah. And so he says, my magic moves, my magic bites, my magic soothes, my magic frights. You are young and not so bold. I am unflinching, 500 years old. He refers to it as my magic, my magic, my magic. So, magic that he has, mine.
His magic, which is very interesting given the next 2 cards we see at the top of chapter 3.
Okay, so and I want to say, preface this with, these cards, I believe, are meant to be taken from the Twin Elders book. And so the person who wrote this book is the
Shepherd King.
So this is the Shepherd King talking. Go ahead.
I was born with a fever, my blood dark as night, with magic unflinching, power and might. My sights, they were endless, my ambitions too vast, so I asked for more blessings, for power amassed. The spirit did warn me that nothing comes free, that bargains and barters all come with a fee. Though payment was dear, I paid what it cost, with blood and with bones and parts of me lost. So mind how you use them and keep up your guard. 12 blessings, 12 curses, 12 providence cards. Each card is both a blessing and a curse, because if you use it for too long, bad things happen. You know, that trope. All magic comes with a cost. Not only did it cost the Shepherd King to make them, but it will cost the user.
This particular card, these are very interesting. There's a lot of explanation and foreshadowing potentially there. So then, we're at dinner with the family. And her aunt says that we've been invited to Stone, which is the castle, the king's castle, for equinox. And she wrinkles her nose as she says it. This is how we start to understand that she doesn't really like society and is kind of like, ugh, we've been invited to Stone for equinox.
And Ione is squealing in glee. She is so excited. She can't wait to go. And Opal's just like, no, don't be so happy. We owe them money. We're behind on our taxes from last year.
Yes, they are behind on taxes. They owe, and we find out that the king is not one to forgive something like that. He's going to be looking for everything that he is owed. Also, we find that the uncle is now willing to part with the nightmare card. He pulls it out and says, I'm going to give this to him and he'll pay me for it. This is a crazy thing because there are only 2 nightmare cards. It is it is arguably the most valid or most expensive, most valuable one because nobody can find or knows where the Twin Adlers one is. Or twin
Alders.
Alders. Yeah, Alders. Nobody knows where it is, so this is arguably the most valuable one there is. Outside of the other nightmare card, there's only 2.
Not only does nobody know where it is, and I don't feel bad kind of going into this. We'll be into it very soon. It's within. It was bartered away. It was given to the forest.
Right. It's
no one knows where it is because nobody's going to be able to talk to the forest spirit.
Yeah. The Shepherd King fucked up his last deal, essentially, and so that card is lost forever, basically.
Lost in the sauce, man.
Yeah. Which also it does. I don't remember if it's been talked about yet, but it's worth mentioning. The only way to get rid of the mist is to combine the deck, all 12 cards, one of each, and bring it to the forest and give it back to the forest, correct?
You have to combine the deck under the tree of the rightful king.
Right.
Or of the king.
Got it. Yep.
So
then you combine the
the-
full deck and give in whatever. Then the mist will stop attacking everyone and we'll stop cursing everyone.
So this is also where Elspeth is kind of starting to put together that it's a little bit fishy how her uncle got this card.
Right.
We get the quote, "Despite my aunt's questions, he gave no more details of how he obtained the nightmare card. Made no mention of the blood I had seen on his sword the day he had brought it home. I pressed my back into my chair and watched him, chilled by the thought that I knew far less about the man at the head of the table than I thought."
He says, I pinched it off a highwayman on the forest road some years ago, and I wrote next to it, did he though?
And I think she's really starting to see things in another light because she just got hit up by some highwaymen.
Yeah. And she also said, there was something strange about his eyes, something about his smile I had not seen before, something false. And then I wrote, yup, next to it.
Yeah. You're not wrong there.
So they talk about how Providence cards look very, very frail, but they will not tear because they're magic.
Gifted my uncle. So then the magic gifted to him by the spirit of the woods. They're talking about how the king, the shepherd king, got this magic, right? Gifted my uncle muttered, infected with it, more like. And then we get the nightmare. I love when the nightmare corpse up in certain things. A heart of gold can still turn to rot. What he wrote, what he did, was all done for naught. His cards are but weapons, his kingdom now cruel. Shepherd of folly, king of the fools.
Love it. Love it.
I'm screaming.
Yeah, and then this is where we go into the Book of Elders. And this is where we get the feeling that, okay, so this is how I want to explain it. Opal, which is her aunt, and her mother, Iris, are like traditionalists with the Book of Elders. They believe to the letter what is put in the Book of Elders, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that court has somewhat distorted how they use the cards, what they're supposed to be used for, and tried to consolidate power in that way. And they're kind of sick, and Opal specifically is kind of sick of the corruption that there is with the king, like, hogging all the cards, and doesn't like the idea of the sickness and putting those people to death. I think she would prefer that they be convalesced or, looked after in some way. And so it's a very female approach to it, to the situation in the world, versus a very male approach to the world. And I think that's the best way to describe it.
I think they also, Opal also understands the severity that is the mist. That keeps growing, mind you. And even Elspeth understands that it's like, if we don't get rid of this mist soon, it will overtake us. But we get into the Providence cards and how they came to be.
Yeah,
They tell it as if it was like bedtime stories, which I think is hilarious.
Right. So Ione is asking if the Shepherd King gave his soul for the cards, and her aunt or her mother nodded and said, but it was the spirit of the wood in the end who would pay. With the Shepherd King's Providence cards, people had magic at their fingertips. They did not have to go into the wood and beg for her blessings. So, and then the no longer venerated? Should I know that word? Venerated. The spirit grew vengeful, treacherous. She created the mist to lure people back to the wood. Those who came upon it lost their way and often their minds. The mist spread, isolating us from neighboring kingdoms, which that gives us some answer as to there are other people, but they don't really, whatever. Worse, children who tarried in it grew sick with fever and their veins darkening. Those who survived the fever often carried magical gifts like those the spirit used to bestow, only more unruly, more dangerous. But these children degenerated over time, and some grew twisted in their bodies, other in their minds. Few survived adulthood. I wrote next to this propaganda. It sounds very propaganda-like, but I don't think it is.
It does. It does sound like fear-mongering, but in the same sense, we do see it. We see one degenerate into their mind. I want to say we see one degenerate body-wise later on in the chapters.
It's one of those things where when you're first reading it, because you're so used to things being not the way that they're described, like you're used to books pulling one over on you, Mm-hmm. You're like, this sounds like propaganda. This sounds what everyone believes, but it's not true. I believe that in this rare instance, what they tell you is true.
Yeah.
Which has never happened in any of the books that we've done a podcast on so far.
Such a breath of fresh air. Thank God. Tell me how it is.
Yep.
But they do go into exactly how it is to lift the mist, right? The 12 call for each other when the shadows grow long, when the days are cut short and the spirit is strong. So it's on the shortest day of the year. You have to do this. They call for the deck and the deck calls them back. Unite us, they say, and we'll cast out the black. At the king's namesake tree, with the black blood of salt, all 12 shall together bring sickness to halt. They'll lighten the mist from mountain to sea, new beginnings, new ends, but nothing comes free.
So essentially it also sounds like they have to have blood of someone who's infected. Mm-hmm. Which the king takes to mean we need to kill someone who's infected. Such a male.
Right?
A male thing. Instead of just cutting someone's blood, just
a couple drops of blood.
We gotta kill him. So they were all okay. So and then they're saying the Shepherd King did not lift the mist nor heal the infection. The spirit tricked him, telling him how to lift the mist only after he bartered his twin Elder's card. Without his final card, the Shepherd King could not unite the deck, and so he never lifted the mist. No king ever has, and no king ever will. My mother mused. Not until someone finds the twin Elder's card and the deck is complete. Until then, the mist will continue to spread. Boom. It gives us the state of things.
Yeah. So, and I get the mindset, spring equinox, it's the spring solstice, it's the longest day of the year, right? You have until the winter solstice. You want to unite the deck, you got to do it by the winter solstice. That is the only day you can do it for this to lift.
6 months?
Mm-hmm.
Right? 6 months.
Give or take, yeah.
6 months or
That's
wait
how long you got. Mm-hmm. Or waited. And who's to say if they have another year, right? Because we learned that, something that we hear a lot is that this has not been a fruitful harvest. There is not going to be as joyous as a celebration because the harvest this year was not as fruitful. Why? Because the mist is cutting off more and more lands. There's less land to grow and more people that need to be rehomed.
Right.
And or just die.
It's an issue. This forest could consume the whole town. Who knows? I get the feeling that this town is very small anyway. It's a village, you know. So then we find Aunt in the garden. She's making a tincture. She also, this is funny, she's trying to convince her to go to Equinox. And I think it's funny because she says in her head, or no, maybe it's the nightmare. It doesn't distinguish. It says the old witch has a point.
I take it as the nightmare because she, Elspeth then like jumps accidentally beheading a flower. So it caught her off guard. But that was also what... Oh, living like a hermit. It won't always be so. Living like a hermit in your uncle's house is no sort of life for a young woman.
The old witch has a point. I think that's funny. I don't know why he would call her an old witch. He is much older than her.
Much older. 500 years.
Yes. So we find out that she's afraid to go to Equinox, mostly because she's afraid she'll start to degenerate in public, essentially. So she's afraid she'll go crazy in public and then she'll be put to death, essentially. This is also where we get that little quote on, perhaps I would grow sick, and no matter how hard I tried to hide it, waste away to nothingness like my mother had. So we're like, what happened with Mom? We don't know.
We get, she has a dream.
For the first time ever.
Oh, for the first time.
The nightmare.
Since touching the nightmare card, she has a dream.
And she's trespassing on his thoughts.
She also makes kind of this random statement of like, whatever his faults, the nightmare did not disturb my wakeless hours. I do not know what he did when I slept, and he did not answer when I asked. I used to think he slept too, but after many years together, I realized he did not sleep at all, right? He just, like, existed somewhere. Who knows? So she has this dream. It was as if, for once, I was trespassing on him. In my dream, I was in an ancient room covered in vines. The old wooden ceiling had rotten, revealing beams of light beneath a canopy of green. Birds chirped, rustling above me. The summer day warm and pure despite the cold. Weathered stone around me. In the center of the room stood a stone wide and tall as a table. Seated upon the stone was a man decorated in gold armor that had long lost its sheen. He was aged, older than my father, gristly and stern. He bore the weight of his armor without wavering, his strength deeply rooted. On his hip rested an ancient rusted sword with branches twisted into a crook carved into the hilt. When he finally saw me, I gasped, recognizing the sharp quality of his unnatural, feline yellow eyes, the irises wide and the pupils narrow. I realized I'd surprised him, intruded on a moment, a place the nightmare had not intended to show me. Then she's quickly found, changes scenery, she's in her uncle's study. The man in his armor had disappeared. In its place was a creature more animal than man. His yellow eyes narrowed. You've come to spy. And then she was like, who was the man wearing the armor? Someone long dead, I'm afraid. He had yellow eyes. Would you like to hear the story? The nightmare whispered. And then we get what we will hear several times. There once was a girl, he murmured, clever and good, who tarried in shadows in the depths of the wood. There also was a king, a shepherd by his crook, who reigned over magic and wrote the old book. The two were together, so the two were the same. The girl, the king, and the monster they became. Listen.
That's all you need to know. Book's over.
Book's over. If it just put the puzzle pieces are there for you.
Yeah. That's all. That's all. All
That's
she
all.
wrote. That's done.
The end. See you next month.
Yeah, exactly. That's. I mean, I don't want to even I don't even want to expand on it because that's dangerous.
Yeah.
So we find that in the next chapter, the first card that says, magic smells of salt, like ocean tides. It carries great balance. It wraps itself around the spirit of the wood. Good and evil, love and hate, life and death. Can you smell it in the mist, in the cards, in your own house? Magic smells of salt. Which we also get because she smells salt every time the nightmare takes control of her. Okay, so we are going to Stone.
We're on our way to Stone. And there's not. They talk more about the Providence cards, this is where we get the breakdown of how many there are of each type, right? And then we get the nightmare speaking up. The hawthorn tree carries... Oh. This is, they're talking about what her uncle, whose name I can't recall, is going to barter for. Because not only is this nightmare card going to supersede what they owe in taxes, but he should be getting something in return, right? And so the nightmare speaks up, and the nightmare says, the hawthorn tree carries few seeds. Its branches are weary, it's lost all its leaves. Be wary the man who bargains and thieves. He'll offer your soul to get what he needs.
Woohoo!
Full stop.
Foreshadowing.
Again. Full stop. The end.
So then Ione starts talking about how she wants to meet the prince, and we learned that the princes are known to be kind of cruel and bad, and are kind of mean boys in the sense of more dramatic because they kill people and torture people. So they're like psychopaths. I don't know if we hear it here or if it's maybe going to be in the next set of chapters, but it's worth mentioning. The nightmare hates the Rowans.
Yeah.
So just he's
does not trust them.
Nope. So he is on and maybe this is why Bess is so against the idea. Maybe just it's in her baser instincts of the Rowans suck. Why are we wanting to meet off Rowan? So that's what we got.
Which, in the same sense, yes, he hates him so much, but then there's this little, exchange that him and Bess has where, they're talking about how her father, Bess's father, mentions the king is restless to obtain the last two cards and he's willing to pay handsomely for them. I flinched recalling my conversation with Ione. The nightmare crawled through my mind. Desperate times, he said. No card is worth a formal introduction to Hoth Rowan, which is, Elspeth. We're talking back to him. And then you have the nightmare going, says the girl who talks to the monster in her head. Not exactly princess material, are we, love?
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah, and it's interesting because Why she didn't say that she was interested in being a princess.
No.
So that's interesting. I don't know. It's weird. Anyway, she sees her father. It's very short-lived. But she decides she's going to stay with them for Equinox because she just kind of fought with Ione a little bit. And then she sees Alex.
Talk about awkward. But something I highlighted, and the only reason I could think to highlight this was because stereotypical fantasy tropes being turned on our heads. In most cases, when you're reading a fantasy book, it's always gods or bless the cauldron, whatever. Now we have trees. When I tell you we're on tree watch for a reason, people, the trees are important.
I love this. Trees, how I hate him, says the Nightmare. He's thoughtful, and I've been awful to him. And then he says, I've seen no problem with that.
Exactly. I see no problem. I love it. That was such a Taryn moment.
Mm-hmm.
Fuck him.
Which I'm learning in my life, by the way. This is something that I'm learning. Men are so much more willing to just say, like, don't be nice to him. Fuck him. What do you do? You really think that you need to, like, be nice to this person? Why? Right? They are so much more free to just not care about someone else's feelings, opinions, whatever, if it doesn't benefit them. And us women are much more bogged down in, well, I feel bad because I've been mean to him. And then it's like, well, what's the problem with you being mean to him? He's getting the wrong idea from you. So, like, set him straight, right? And I'm learning that this is a very nice trait to adopt, to adopt in your head, because you'll have a lot more freedom in your head to just be yourself. So, FYI. And
2025, we're all taking on the idea of, fuck it, it's not worth my time.
So as, like, there's that, like, little thing with, like, women and men is that you give, like, a woman a home and she makes it a house, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or no, you give her a house, she makes it a home. Opposite. You give her, like, ingredients to make food, she makes a meal, that kind of thing. We always make more out of what is given to us, right? Why is it that we take on other people's feelings and make them into our own problems? It's the same thing. We need to stop doing that. That's a 2025, we're not doing that anymore. We're not taking on other people's feelings.
Unfortunately, I can't fully adopt it. It is in my job description that I do take on the children's feelings.
Well, the children is fine, but not full-grown adults who can deal with their own feelings. That's what I'm saying. I think it's probably in us because of children, right? But here
it's not motherly instinct,
but
whatever.
Here we are taking on the world's feelings and making something out of them. No, thank you. This is not going to be us in 2025.
No, I can hardly emotionally control my own emotions.
Right.
Keep yours to yourself. The men can keep them.
I am better at sorting out other people's emotions than my own, so maybe that's more enjoyable. Anyway, so that's what the Nightmare just reminded me of. All of that is he's like, I see no problem with how awful you've been to him.
Yeah.
Continue to do so. So this Alex dude is like, come sit with me, and she's kind of all freaked out because she can see all the colors of the cards. So
this Alex dude got kissed once 3 years ago and has not lived it down. He is obsessed with her.
Yes. So she's like, nope, I'm going to go sit with my family, which she doesn't.
She finds the first empty seat and takes a seat.
she sits next to the absolute worst person for her to sit next to. She sits next to Emery.
Emery, you.
Emery the psychopath.
Emery, the cousin of the prince.
Yes. And the brother of the captain of the guard.
Yeah. Yeah, that Emery.
Perfect. Yes. So, she talks with him, but she kind of is like, uh-oh. She gets kind of nervous, and so she's like, I gotta go. I'm done.
Yeah, like, doesn't want to eat. And to the point, like, mind you, Emery is drunk. And he goes, I agree. Why waste the fine space of the stomach on soup?
So, he follows her. And then he seems normal at first, but then he gets a little bit creepy. He grabs her arm, and he's kind of like, there's like a rail, and I feel like he's like bending her over a rail a little bit, like to the point where she feels like she could fall or he could murder her. Mm-hmm. And he says, I see you, Elspeth Spindle. I see a pretty maiden with long black hair and charcoal eyes. I see a yellow gaze narrowed by hate. I see darkness and shadow. And I see her fingers, long and pale, covered in blood. She's like, holy fuck. And she slaps him.
How do you know?
And she pushes him down the stairs, I think.
Probably. Sounds about right.
And then his brother finds him.
Mm-hmm.
And then he runs away, and the brother comes to talk to her. Raven, you. My father's successor, captain of the destroyers. Which now she's like even more afraid. She's like, holy fuck.
Yeah. And he asks her who she is, and he goes, I know who your she tells, nor are you, what is your house? Spindle, my father is, I know who your father is, Raven said. I also know Eric has only 2 daughters living at Spindle House. Why do you not live with your family, Miss Spindle? Mm-hmm. I don't see how that's your business. The fuck? And then she literally quite says, I don't see how that's any of your business. Excuse me, I'm tired. I need to go lay down. Goodbye.
Mm-hmm. So, and that's all we got. He introduces himself. He goes, I'm Raven, you. And she goes, I know. Like, they're kind of dancing around each other for a second here.
And then the last is still, even as rest took me, I could not help but wonder just how Raven you had been warned of Emery's ill manners.
The
maiden.
A maiden. Be wary the pink. Be wary the rose. Be wary of beauty divine unopposed. Her thorns will grow sharp. She'll eat her own heart. Be wary of beauty divine unopposed. Now, where is this? Maybe it's in the future a little bit. The Nightmare says that this card is very misused and misunderstood.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. So the maiden increases external beauty.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how people are using it. But he says it's being used wrong.
I believe, and this has been my belief from the beginning, people use the maiden as if it is plastic surgery. They're using it for pomp and circumstance. They're using it to gain status, to be able to, sell their daughter off to the highest bidder kind of deal. However, low-key, the maiden was probably made to be like a trick. I'm going to use this to get information and then go back to myself. It was never meant for a permanent thing, and that's why we get that. She'll eat her own heart. If you use it too long, you're gonna grow cold.
Yeah. Let's see. Is there anything important? Before they go to the garden.
she
so.
starts to have kind of this inkling that there's more to Emery. Because her and the nightmare, obviously, but her and the nightmare have their little back and forth. He mentioned yellow eyes. How could he possibly have known about your eyes? Do you think he knows there's a 500-year-old monster stalking in the dark corners of your mind? Mm-hmm. That's impossible. And, like, she writes it off. Still, there was something so unnerving about him.
And they say that the Hughes sent Emery to live in stone with the king. But why?
Yeah.
So we get the sense here that something's wrong with him.
Something's amiss.
So they decide to go walk in the gardens with the women while the men hunt. She distinguishes the maiden card, and the nightmare reiterates, be wary of the pink, be wary of the rose, be wary of beauty divine unopposed. She goes to her aunt and asks about Emery. And she doesn't think that so she thinks maybe he's an infected child, but the aunt is like, that's very unlikely. They're very good at, sussing these things out. So she's like, that's not what it is.
And then, boom, smack in your face, a pink card, and guess who's holding it? Ione.
Ione. Yes. And Elspeth gets mad and kind of gives away the fact that she can see it. She says something about her having it, and Ione goes, how do you know that I have it?
Yeah. And before then, as Ione comes in with this card, the nightmare perks up. He goes, interesting. A gift from King Rowan in exchange for your uncle's nightmare. And Elspeth is like, no. The maiden card's nowhere near as valuable as the nightmare. Like, it's not just a simple trade. Then perhaps the maiden card is merely part of a much larger sum. Mm-hmm. So we're getting that sense of, like, this is just the beginning of whatever's in store. Mm-hmm. Right?
Mm-hmm. And she's not using it yet, which is great, but she probably just got it. So this is when he talks. This is when he talks about the Rowans. The berry of Rowans is red, always red. The earth at its trunk is dark with bloodshed. No water, no cloth can lessen its spread. He'll ask for a maiden, then turn her heart dead. Ooh, creepy. Oh, that's creepy.
Creepy and something that I am not allowed to dig further into.
Yeah, so she's trying to figure it out. She goes, what if Hoth asks you to marry him? And she says, you shouldn't say yes. And it becomes very clearly that Ione is gonna say yes if he does. She's, like, all on this train. She's all on board.
Mm-hmm. Well, and beyond that, so what stuck out to me the most is this one thing was Ione saying, you ask so much of me, Elspeth, and all of it for yourself. So in Ione's mind, Elspeth is asking her all of this and demanding, like, don't do that, because she doesn't want, obviously, the king, the prince, and them getting closer to her, finding out that Elspeth is infected, whatever. But in the same sense, Elspeth has this little, like, nightmare dude in her head going, yeah, it's going to be real funny. Because remember what we said earlier? About our little yellow girl?
This is when the nightmare says, the maiden is not just a card for of vanity. Magic is not for vanity. And then he says, a deeply misunderstood card, the maiden.
Mm-hmm.
So, and she's worried that she's going to turn, like, cold and heartless and whatever. And she's just very concerned for Ione at this point.
Well, yeah, and pair what he just said of, no water nor cloth can lessen its spread. He'll ask for a maiden, then turn her heart dead, ask for a maiden. Obviously, you're going to take Ione, you're going to turn her into a maiden by having her use the card. Now let's go back to the beginning of the book. Yellow girl, soft and clean. Yellow girl, plain unseen, before the card. Yellow girl, overlooked. Yellow girl, won't be queen.
Oops. Yeah.
Just going to throw that back out there. Yellow girl won't be queen.
Then we get hit straight in the face with a nightmare card. The second nightmare card. Who has it?
Raven.
This one freaks her out the most, this card, because obviously she has some experience with it. It's not her favorite thing.
Yeah. And then we start chapter 6 with the highwayman meets the hangman. Behind the mask, the highwayman carries 2 eyes for seeing, 2 ears for hearing, and 1 tongue for lying. There is no second chance for the cult purse. The highwayman meets the hangman. So,
that's concerning.
Slightly concerning. Also, the fact that this man first of all, oh, I see you're bleeding. Are you okay? You're okay. Great. So why were you on the road alone at night 15 days ago?
Yeah, that was like, oh fuck. Yeah, why were you on the forest road alone at night while 15 days passed? She's like, holy fuck, these are the highwaymen that I fought off. And I had like
the dagger.
Strength. Yep. She's like, uh-oh. Run away.
Yikes.
Run away. She goes, I assaulted the bloody captain of the Destroyers.
And he's just like, let me out. Let me at him. Let me at him. But beyond that, she's like, I'm dead. Like, I am dead. They're not going to believe me. They won't believe that I committed a felony. I attacked him. They're not going to believe me when I say that he was a highwayman. It's his word against my word.
And so she runs away.
Literally runs away. Like, calls for the nightmare to help her get away.
I don't think he did. I don't see any, like, smelling of salt. Anything other than her just running away.
Yes, because I faltered, my footsteps tangled, but the nightmare's reflexes were sure. So he did help out. Because there are points where she, like, refers to him having control of her body.
But he didn't
the nightmare's strength.
So then he speaks into her mind. And she freaks out. Wait, Elspeth Spindle. I'm not going to hurt you. She freaks out. She's like, no, he cannot be into my head.
And, like, he's on top of her, trying to get her to shut up because there are hunting dogs and the king, whom she was running towards.
He says, I'm not going to hurt you. You, on the other hand, and then, because she broke his nose, and he goes, that's twice you've handed me my ass and run off. Love that. So she makes it very clear, get out of my head, get out of my head. He stops using the card. He taps it 3 times. We learned that in order to use a card, you tap it 3 times. In order to stop using a card, you tap it 3 times.
Yeah. And then he focuses on her arms, where you can see the black veins, the infection's magic, black as night. The nightmare watched Raven you through my eyes, his voice slick and untrusting. What creature is he asked. With a mask made of stone, captain, highwayman, or beast yet unknown.
I love the what creature is he. I like that.
What is he?
So he's like, why did you run away from me? And they're trying to, like, figure each other out right here. And this was a really brave move of Raven. Like, really brave. Like, I don't know. But I guess he probably thinks that they're both fucked because they both were on the road at night, you know?
They both know each other's secret, and he even tells you, well, he sees the black veins, right? And he goes, this is why you ran. Like, in a question, like, this is why you were running? But also, like, hell yeah, this is why I ran. Like, it is illegal for me to be alive.
And she says, I'm not going to the dungeon. Better you kill me than take me there. I'm not going to kill you. I'm not even going to arrest you, but we need to get inside. And then she asks what he heard in her head, because she wants to know if he heard the nightmare or not. And he did not.
No, but he heard some clicking. Mm-hmm. Just a faint noise, a tapping or a clicking.
Mm-hmm. She says, my mind is my own. I didn't give you permission to enter it. So she's very like, this is my boundary. You do not enter my mind ever again. Go ahead.
Yeah. Like, don't come again. He says, oh, I'll save you the trouble. I have no magic. He's like, I don't want to talk about this, like, in an open field. She goes, no, I don't have magic. And he goes, you're a decent liar. You'll fit right in. Beasts yet unknown then, the nightmare murmured. I'll come so long as we don't go through the garden. My thoughts flew to Ione. I want to avoid the women and their Providence cards. He's like, yeah, sure. And then he stops and he goes, how did you know there were Providence cards in the garden? And that is where, twice now, she has given herself away twice. Raven's just the only smart one to pick up on it.
And that is the end of our chapters for this week. So for next week, we find out what's going on with Raven, what's going on with Emery, and we get a plan. We get, like, a motion set in motion of what this book is going to be about, what the mission is.
And with that, we have concluded our world building phase of
Ta-da!
Book 1.
I actually, didn't really, when I did the chapter breakdowns, I didn't really, plan it super, I didn't look at the book when I was planning it. I just looked at the chapter count and the weeks. This was a good moment to end this one.
It really was.
So.
You've been doing a great job at these split ups, by the way.
And I never look at the book. That's the fun
It just always works out.
I just was like, I know that we should probably do a lighter chapter in the beginning because the world building is always so much to talk about. So I always try to do a lighter chapter thing in the beginning and then heavier as we go. But ta-da!
Here we are.
Anyway, so that was chapters 1 through 6. And then for next week, we will have chapters 7 through, I have it in 2 seconds, 7 through 17. So 10 chapters for next week. It's a little more of a section. So we are, looking forward to the rest of this. Daina can't say much.
Daina really can't. She has to. I now understand how Bonnie felt when we went over from Blood and Ash.
Yeah, it's rough. Which, by the way, have you? How far did you get with Blood and Ash?
I have finished the first 3 books. I took a pause because I was going to get ready. So I'm reading in publishing order, right? I took a pause because it came holiday season and I really just wanted to read my rom-com books, which I read one of. And I'm getting ready to start back on them as soon as I finish the current book I'm reading, which is Variation by Rebecca Yarros. In case anyone cared.
I am not reading anything on the side. Ooh. Sad. I should, but I don't know what I would read, to be honest.
I say reading. It is audio, and it's because I was cleaning out my classroom and didn't want to listen to music. So we put on a book instead.
I might wait for Onyx Storm, and I probably will listen to that because I've listened to all of Fourth Wing thus far. I only read Fourth Wing when we did the podcast, and it was a reread, and it was physical. But other than that, I have listened to all of Fourth Wing.
I have decided that I'm either going to need to pre-order the audio or the Kindle version of Onyx Storm as well, since
will it not be
I
available
am now... Huh?
Will the audio not be available right away?
It probably will be, but I'm going to try to get it pre-ordered so I just don't forget about it. Since I won't be able to grab my physical copy, because I go out of town the day it comes out.
Oops.
Oh well, it's fine.
So yeah, it's an exciting month. Starting in January, usually it's very exciting with books until November. November's when they stop. Like, December, things don't come out.
Yeah.
So I will look at some of the other ones too and see if there's anything else coming out this year that I'm excited about. Do you have any? I think there's something in like June.
Yeah, June 10th is the last book for the From Blood and Ash series.
Ta-da. Steel Trap.
It is my goal to have that series finished by June 10th so that I can read the final one when it's published and not get spoiled.
When I was at Barnes & Noble yesterday, I just saw the Visions of Flesh and Fire, which is Ms. Willa Collins. I was like, oh,
Ooh.
I probably need to read that. I haven't read that. So.
Ooh.
But yes,
A
very
lot
excited.
of fun book things.
Yes, and in the comments, let us know what you're reading. And anything, now it's fantasy only, but anything that you would like us to cover in the future months. I do have the next 2 months planned out, and it's ambitious. All I will tell you this week is that we are going to be doing one book for 2 months, because the reason I want to do this book is because everybody struggles to get through it. And it's such a good book, and everyone deserves to get through it. And I think together we can do it. I read it already, and I did struggle to get through it, but I cried at the end.
I have not read it, and Bonnie will probably be the person telling me to keep going.
Oh, it's rough. But everyone deserves to get through it. And I think the reason why it's so hard to get through is because the world structure is confusing as heck. So, if we go in with the podcast explaining the world structure, I think it'll be easier to understand.
Fair enough.
So we might have a podcast like where we start the podcast, or start the month with a podcast of like, let's explain the world to you first, and then you go into reading it. Because it'd be confusing.
Okay.
So, that's what I got.
With that, also comment what you think that book's going to be.
Yeah, I know, right? People will know. Some people will know. And with that, we will see you next week. Ooh, I have a hair.
Whoop whoop.
See you next week. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Thank you for being with us, and we will see you.